Hello and welcome to the Pop Pod. I am Sam, also known as Pop Sam Cam. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. This is one that I've actually been wanting to do for a little while. A lot of people have asked me about it, and I feel like I haven't put my definitive ranking of Lana Del Rey albums out there. So I'm going to do exactly that. Today we are going to go through from the worst one to the best one, and I will let you know what I think about all the albums. I've been going back and listening to them, digging through them, and I think my ranking has changed a little bit, to be honest. Lana has been teasing another album that we still don't know the title of. She's been going back and forth on different things. She's obviously been touring Europe over the summer. We may have a new album from her by the end of the year that's like kind of in an Americana rootsy vibe, but obviously for right now, we don't have that, so I am going to rank all of her 8 albums. For the purpose of this exercise, I'm not going to include Paradise because, some people consider it as an album, but it's dramatically shorter than the rest of them. So I will say now that I do really enjoy that collection of songs, but it won't be included in this rank. If you like this podcast, don't forget to like or subscribe to it. And you can also follow me on TikTok and Instagram at PopSamCam. Don't forget to rate it 5 stars if you love what you're hearing. And also come and join us in the Discord because I'm going to put this question out there. I want to see your rank. I would be really interested to know where you sit on these Lana songs. Let's start with the album that I have in number 8. This changes for me all the time, and this is really tricky because I love all of these albums, but I feel like some of them maybe are more flawed than others. So in number 8, this is really hard, and I'm literally in my head now tossing up what I should do here, but I think I've got to stick to my guns, and in number 8 put Honeymoon. Honeymoon is an album that I have been on and off with since it was released, basically. I feel like this is kind of, Honeymoon delivers what Lana Del Rey is if Lana Del Rey is the caricature that people made her out to be. And I say this with affection because I think that it's the album that leans into this like vintage Hollywood feel that is the character that she's supposedly portraying. And I don't mean that in a sense that she was fabricating this character for this album. I don't think she was. But aesthetically, I think she was leaning into it quite heavily. And as a result, I think that we end up with some of her clunkiest songs, but also some of her best songs, weirdly. I think that Terrence Loves You is absolutely incredible and a gateway to some of her more kind of loose form, jazzy work that she does further on down the line. I think that song is great. I also really love what she does on things like Salvatore, and then I'm trying to think of the other moments that I'm a big fan of. I'm a fan of the title track as well. There are so many moments on this album that I love, but I just can't get past the fact that I think that too many of the moments feel like they're not progressing the Lana Del Rey story or aesthetic enough. And when I say that, I think that Freak is a little like too sludgy for me. I also think that like the Blackest Day, 24, Swan Song, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, that kind of section of songs, while I think there are some great songs in there, it's too much of the same and it starts to feel a little bit, I don't know, it all like merges into one. I also think those songs like God Knows I Tried are incredible. It's a really confusing one for me, but I just don't feel like I gel with this album as much as I gel with the others. And I feel like that's just because it's the most Lana Del Rey album, if Lana Del Rey is what the press was saying that she was during Born to Die, if that makes any sense to you. It makes sense to me. In number 7, I'm going to go with her debut album, Born to Die. I think that this album is obviously one of the most influential albums in pop music, and it's almost hard to critique it in that way because the whole sound of it has been so influential. Like, you cannot think of many of the modern pop stars, from Billie Eilish to even Taylor Swift to Gracie Abrams to, gosh, like, take your pick. They've been they've been influenced by Born to Die in some way. And that's because it does this thing where it merges trap beats with singer-songwritery stuff and with this kind of vintage nostalgia. And that at the time was so heavily critiqued as being fabricated and also being like not authentic. And I never had that issue with this album. Actually, I've always found it quite authentic. And I think as time has gone on, we've seen that Lana Del Rey is one of the most authentic out there, and it's totally fine to be theatrical and to be playing like almost a character, because at the end of the day, pop music is entertainment. But I think if you can find a way to bring through your vulnerability within that, then that's really special. And I think that this album does a good job at telling her story. I just don't think that her songwriting, as we know it now, is as developed on Born to Die as it is on other records. And I say this because I just think that her lyrics have become so much more vivid and so much less kind of weighed down in aesthetic and weighed down in... It's really difficult to say without kind of like agreeing with the criticism that she was playing a character, which I really don't agree with at all. But I do think there's something really smoothed over about this record that is just not the same with other albums by her. And that's why I have it down lower, even though obviously there are some of the greatest songs of her career on this LP. Video Games, I think a 10 out of 10 pop song, perfect. Radio is just like pop perfection as well, and we've seen that in how it's kind of been reintroduced into the mainstream thanks to TikTok. I mean, there are just so many great songs off this. I think Off to the Races is lofty and weird and hypnotic. I think National Anthem is such a strong chorus. And to be honest, there's not a lot of moments that I don't like on this, but I just feel like sometimes the lyrics are telling us, this is difficult to explain exactly how I feel about this, but sometimes it feels like she is buying into, the same as how I feel with Honeymoon, sometimes it feels like she's buying into Lana Del Rey as the character and not letting her vulnerability shine through as much. And I know that's kind of contradicting what I said before, but I'm saying this in the slight, like, I'm saying that these are all 8 out of 10 albums, and this is a slight problem that I have with this, where she just like goes into the kind of gangster hip hop aesthetic too much, and I don't really buy it at times. Like, I think on songs like maybe $1 Million Man, Carmen, This Is What Makes Us Girls, I don't really relate to that much. I've gotten in trouble for saying that I don't like This Is What Makes Us Girls before, because I know a lot of people relate to that song heavy. But just for me, this album is too smoothed over, maybe too lost in a narrative that I don't always buy, and that's why I put it down lower, even though it has some absolutely perfect songs on it and is undoubtedly one of the most influential albums of the 21st century. Moving on to number 6, and in number 6 I am going to put Lust for Life. This one changes for me all the time because, again, I have so many favorites on this album. This is probably the most eclectic Lana Del Rey album that she's ever released, and it feels like she is at the point where she is deciding whether she wants to go in this like Great American Songbook singer-songwriter vibe, or she wants to stay in this trap lane with the rappers like A$AP Rocky, and also like Playboi Carti, I think, features on this album as well. It's wild to have an album that actually does manage to sound cohesive. That's guest artists are A$AP Rocky, Playboi Carti, Stevie Nicks, and then Sean Lennon. It's just so bizarre, but to be honest, I think this has like this feeling that she is actually starting to get to the core of her songwriting and really figure out how to make it excel without thinking about all of the outside influences of the radio, the commercial impacts, like the label. It feels like she's actually doing what she wants to do. And I feel like the moments where this album falters are the ones where it feels like she is maybe playing too heavy to the commercial idea of what Lana Del Rey should be. Lust for Life, the title track, has never really worked for me that much. I don't think the A$AP Rocky songs are that successful, but I do think when she gets into some of her more heartfelt writing on this, it is absolutely stunning. Like, Tomorrow Never Came for me has always been one of my favorite Lana Del Rey songs. I think it's just such a beautifully written song. I think that Change is one of the most like vulnerable that she's ever been. This song is so raw, and I feel like it's a rawness that she picks up on something like Norman effing Rockwell when she gives us a song like Hope is a Dangerous Thing for a Girl Like Me. This is the moment where she plants those seeds. But then I will say that some of the more trappy influence moments work really well on this. I think that In My Feelings has this looseness to it that is honestly just so entertaining when she just out of nowhere says, fuck, I love that. I think that Love, for example, goes back to the Honeymoon sound but does it extremely successfully. Like that Gatsby kind of aesthetic, I think, is delivered really in a really believing way on Love. I don't know if it's just that she gets like closer to the mic. She probably doesn't even get closer to the mic. It just feels like she is sharing more of her heart on this album than she had in the past, and I absolutely love that about it. I know that doesn't sound like I have many criticisms for it, but I am putting it in number 6 just because I think it is her least cohesive album and perhaps her most confusing album to make sense of it. But I do think it is a really important album for the trajectory of Lana Del Rey, which takes us to number 5. And in number 5, I'm going to put Chemtrails Over the Country Club. This is an album that was difficult to assess at the time because I think that coming off the back of Norman effing Rockwell, which is obviously such a classic, it was always going to be compared to that. And Chemtrails is a much more contained album. It's much smaller sounding. The country influences start to come in. And also there was the question for the culture of it all, which made framing it quite difficult, I think. But I do think coming back to this album now, when you've had like 5 years to really think about it, the returns are much better. White Dress, one of my favorite Lana Del Rey songs of all time. And this is a really important moment in the trajectory of Lana Del Rey because vocally she starts to let things fly, and that really, really helps her out over the next couple of albums and makes the music so much more emotionally raw and just so much easier to connect to her. I mean, we've always known that Lana Del Rey has kind of a random spirit. We know that in the way that she announces albums that never come. She delivers Pixar covers for things. There is no more random an artist than Lana Del Rey. And I think that by just doing these really kind of imperfect but really stark vocal movements, it captures her personality so beautifully. And also the lyrics just get stranger on this album as well. Down at the Men in Music Business Conference, so bizarre but so beautifully captures this idea of innocence and like nostalgia that she's trying to portray on White Dress. I also think that the title track is brilliant. I love the way that she plays with auto-tune on Tulsa Jesus Freak. Let Me Love You Like a Woman was a song that I didn't love at the time because I felt like it was unimaginative in its songwriting. But over time, I've actually started to like embrace it as more of like it feels like an American classic in a way. I think that Dark But Just a Game is some of the best work that she's done with Jack Antonoff. I do think that this album loses its way a little bit as it goes on and it perhaps becomes a little too drawn out. I think that the country songs work for me in an individual setting, but they kind of destroy the aesthetic that she sets up so beautifully at the start of the record. It just feels like one of the least ambitious Lana albums, which is why it lands lower in the list. But I also think it's a really easy album to listen to, and it's a really easy album to swallow. And that cannot be said for almost any other Lana Del Rey albums that feels they're always quite dense. There's a lot to get through. And I don't think that's the case with Chemtrails. I've actually really grown quite fond of this album over the last couple years. In number 4, I am going to go with, this feels like I'm doing it on the spot, and I promise I'm not, but I'm just like trying to reassess the decisions that I've made and make sure that they're the right ones. In number 4, I'm going to go with Ultraviolence. This is an album that's often sat at number 2 in my list, at times at number 1, and I feel like it's such an important album, and it's interesting that she does end up giving us Honeymoon and Lust for Life, which I think sit more closely to Born to Die than this album does, because this album feels like a total rebellion and rejection of any idea that people had of her, and I think that it's so important for her realizing that her power is that rejection of that kind of stuff, and just following her artistic pulse, and it's just so obvious that that's exactly what she's doing on this album. She teams up with Dan Auerbach from the Black Keys, and together they create this sound that is kind of rooted in rock and roll. It's really bluesy. It's very rough, feels unfinished at points. Some of these songs are exceptionally long. The lead single, West Coast, does basically a beat change in the chorus and takes it to a totally different place, which I remember being so confused by the first time I heard it, because I was used to Born to Die, which does a much better job at kind of making Lana Del Rey for the radio. This album just totally doesn't care about that at all. And I think in doing so really highlights the strength of her songwriting as well. I think that Brooklyn Baby is some of the best narrative driven work that she's ever delivered in her career. I think that Shades of Cool does this like really elongated, smoky jazz bar thing where she just goes into like the loftiest, highest parts of her voice, and so beautiful. Cruel World, one of the best Lana Del Rey album openers ever. I think that it is such a tough track and such a great setup for where she goes on the rest of the album. Where this album kind of falls again is I think she introduces this like gangstery like toughness to it on songs like Fucked My Way Up to the Top that I don't think are totally believable, and I feel like that's where it goes into like the character playing a bit but that is like a very small criticism of an album that I think is beautifully written and so anthemic and so ambitious at points as well. The chorus of songs like Old Money and Money, Power, Glory just feel like she's singing it with her whole chest open, and I love that about this album. I think that Ultraviolence is a really, really strong point in her discography. The only reason that I have it down right now is because I am just so enamored by where she went in the latter part of her career, and the songwriting that she embraced, and the looseness of structure, and this total like I think she does it on Ultraviolence where she doesn't really buy into what the public's idea of Lana Del Rey is and what she should be doing, but I feel like she blows that door even more wide open after Norman effing Rockwell, and she just becomes such a brilliant songwriter. I mean, she's always been a great songwriter, but she just taps into something that's so uniquely Lana Del Rey. And I think you're either going to sit on one side. I think you're really going to be on the team where you enjoy the material from the earlier part of her career, or you're going to be on the team where you like what she's done in the latter part. And I just feel like I've learnt so much more about Lana Del Rey from these 3 records that I'm about to rank than I did with the first kind of 5 albums that she delivered or so. So the first album. In number 3, I'm going to go with Did You Know There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard. Obviously the most recent record that she's released, and an album that just plays with form in the most interesting way. Like, I don't think we ever could have expected to get a song like Fingertips from Lana. It's just structureless. It feels like total like word vomit on a page, and yet we learn so much about her in terms of her concerns about having children, her mental health, juggling fame with also this like reclusive sort of Lana Del Rey that she is at home. It's just so much packed into one song and so beautifully sung. And I think that's the joy of Did You Know There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard, is it feels like she is just totally playing in a field where there are absolutely no rules. She's teaming up with the collaborators that she absolutely loves. It feels so natural, her collaboration with Jack on this one. A song like Let the Light In, obviously her and Father John Misty sound so at home together. There's a warmth that just bleeds from that song. And there's a warmth to this album in general, I think, given that the themes that she's touching on are quite knotty and quite hard to get across to an audience that has often written off Lana Del Rey as being like not a complex character and quite easy to understand in terms of her just chasing this aesthetic. This album really shows that she has real complexity to her work, and the character is just not true at all. It is so personal and so vulnerable, picks up from a lot of the themes on Blue Banisters and just runs with it and takes it even further. I always like the work as well where Lana Del Rey considers her legacy, and I think that happens on a song like Did You Know There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard, which has these gorgeous like gospel undertones to it, and this chorus like when's it going to be my turn, and then Don't Forget Me, that like refrain that just keeps happening, which I feel like is the core of this album. Like, how do I protect my legacy, not just as an artist, but how do I protect it as a human being, and what is the mark that I want to leave on this earth if I'm not going to have children, and if I'm not going to have my work embraced by like a wider audience? How do I make sure that I've made a mark and that people understand me? And there's always been a frustration at the core of Lana Del Rey that people do not understand her. And I think because of them not understanding her, they've created this character of her in their head that is not so complex and that is kind of rooted in this like gangster Nancy Sinatra kind of feel. And this album totally unravels that and is like, let me tell you about the depths of my personality and let me try and make you understand me a bit more. And I really feel that on this album. I feel the community of family that's surrounding her on songs like The Grants and also Grandfather Please Stand on the Shoulders of My Father While He's Deep Sea Fishing. That's a mouthful. But then also friendship and like the embrace of that on a song like Margaret that also has a looseness to it that is really, really endearing. I just think that this is a really loose, nice album that is so personal, and I just learnt so much about Lana from listening to this album. I feel like it's a beautifully vulnerable record. In number 2, I'm going to go with the album that I feel like she starts to really do that sort of songwriting successfully on, which is Blue Banisters. I feel like a lot of people were calling to know more about her. She's often been criticized for bringing up themes of abuse and like, I guess, daddy issues and like neglect and things like that, because people felt like it was part of this character that she was creating to bring more intrigue to herself. And we know, or the real fans of Lana over time know, that that's totally false. And I think on this album, when she goes, here's the deal, because I know you want to talk about it, and she's going like, I'm going to tell you some shit now. Like, I'm ready to tell you some shit. I don't want to promote this album. I don't want to have to talk about it, but I'm going to let you into my story, maybe for the first time ever, this vividly. And she kicks it off like with Textbook, Blue Banisters, Arcadia, 3 of the most revealing songs that she's ever given us. And so just like, what's the right word for it? There's a grandiosity to the way that she delivers it and the way that she gives us her voice on this album as well. It's so generous the way that she uses it. It's so full-bodied in a way that we've never heard it before, particularly on a song like Blue Banisters. And I love the songwriting. I feel like the songwriting on this album is so to the point and also so good at scene setting. Like, I think that she was doing a lot of traveling through the middle and the south of America at this point, and you could feel that setting throughout the whole thing in songs like Black Bathing Suit. Obviously Blue Banisters is really good at doing that as well. But then she's managed to collect songs from her whole career, songs that have been demos for a long time that had leaked online or whatever, to help aid in telling this story as well. And I feel like that's a really clever detail, because it doesn't it doesn't make out this album like she's just sat down and she's like, okay, I'm going to tell my story now and I'm going to write it all down right now as I remember it. She's taken fragments of her past to help us get to this point. And I love that. I love the frustration that comes through on a song like Dealer. I love the broodingness that's on a song like Thunder. And I think it all complements these newer songs like Blue Banisters and Wildfire. Why can't I say that? Wildflower, Wildfire. It all aids it in telling this story. I think that it's a beautifully pieced together record. It is a record that doesn't have to be explained. I think there's a humor to some of the lines that she delivers, including the "fuck you, Kevin" one, and the things about cryptocurrency as well that she brings into that song. Just so clever. Absolutely love this album and think it's really integral. If you really want to understand Lana Del Rey, this is the first place to start. Blue Banisters. In number 1, I'm going to go with Norman fucking Rockwell, which I think that you've already guessed. This is a classic. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. It does a phenomenal job at using her own personal story within America to also tell the story of a country that she feels is collapsing at the same time. This album comes just like after the election of Trump the first time. There are the California fires that kind of happen around the same time as well. And she uses all this imagery to depict a nation that she loves. Like she's used so much American symbolism throughout her work, and often in quite a powerful way and not in a critical way. But on this album, I think she really flips that, and she criticizes it a lot while also looking inward. I think that songs like The Greatest and even Norman effing Rockwell, the title track in California, say a lot about the American story and what's happening to America as a country and the legacy of America as well. And I think that is fascinating to a point. But what makes this album so fascinating is within that broad story that she's telling, she zones in on herself and tells a story about somebody who's living through these times like the rest of us are, and cuts to the core in a way that we had never heard her before. I think hope is a dangerous thing for a woman like me to have, but I have it, is kind of the core of this story in terms of her trying to reckon with the sadness she has, but also the optimism that she has, and how she's always flicking back and forth between the two. Don't ask if I'm happy, you know that I'm not, but at best I can say I'm not sad, is like, mwah, beautiful lyric, and kind of like captures this album in general. And I think that the visions that she has of this album, the nostalgia that she couples into it all, in terms of, I'm thinking of a song called California where she recounts a relationship, but then also talks about what it would feel like if they met back up again and had this perfect meeting that would never sort of happen, but the imagination of it is enough to fuel her desire for now. And then also How to Disappear, when she talks about in the final verse of Now It's Been Years Since I Left New York, and she's got kids and a family in a white picket yard, and like all these things that she felt like she had to do to depict the American dream, but it's actually left her feeling melancholic and really sad, is just such a powerful story to tell across this whole record, and begins to tell the narrative of the Lana Del Rey story, which she digs into and mines into so much deeper on Blue Banisters and Did You Know There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard. But I think what those albums have is they have something really uniquely personal where it's all about her, whereas on Norman effing Rockwell, context is everything. The context of America in general and just that symbolism just makes Norman effing Rockwell such an appropriate record for this time. I always think back about how crazy it is that The Greatest has this feeling that it was written in the midst of the pandemic when she says, I miss New York and I miss rock and roll. I wish things would feel the way it used to when we were doing nothing at all. Like, the fact that that feels like she predicted that entire situation in 2019 is crazy to me. And I think what she was recognizing is a world that was like really starting to crumble and really starting to feel the weight at that time. Depicts it so excellently. The Jack Antonoff and Lana Del Rey partnership on this album is incredible. I love it. Like, a song like Venice Bitch, honestly, one of the best songs ever written, and the way that they just take their time and allow themselves to develop that over 8 minutes. So stunning. I love this album with all of my heart, and it will always land in number 1 unless she comes through and this new album she's about to deliver is an absolute knockout. But this isn't the kind of album that an artist only makes once in their career. It is so special. I would love to hear your ranking of Lana Del Rey albums. You can comment it below if you're on Spotify or on YouTube as well. Otherwise, you can jump into my DMs, tell me your thoughts on these albums. I hope that I've done a good job at explaining it. Lana Del Rey is not always an easy one to explain because there's so much complexity to her work, and also the context in terms of how she was framed early on in her career and how she's shed that, and now the embrace that she's gotten at the end of her career. That's very difficult to wrap up in one sort of like half an hour podcast episode. But I hope you've enjoyed my ranking. I will be back next week with more episodes. We were back on Friday, actually, for the Bop or Flop episode. Thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and rate the podcast. I will see you next time. Goodbye.